This is Dee Tox. It is another fascinating episode of Bullets to Bedpans, and I have my spicy friend with me, Miss Leslie. Hey, Leslie.
Hey, hey.
How are you?
I'm good. Happy to be back.
Back again. She's actually doing her own podcast. She's now her solo podcast, Hero to Hero. How's that going?
It is going very well. I think I've got about 6 episodes now in the bank. On it's airing 7:30 Central Standard Time, and it's going great. I've had some great guests and getting a lot of good feedback. So, Coming Home Well Network, if you have a chance to catch it, let me know. Give me some good feedback. So, yeah, I
It's
would
a
love to hear what you have to think about it.
That's on the radio stream, right? Our Coming Home Well
Yes,
radio stream. So
yes, it
if you
is.
guys didn't know that Coming Home Well, our parent podcast, took all our podcasts and then made some other shows, and we put a lot of music in there, and we have this 24/7 radio stream that y'all can listen to. And it's actually in an app form. So you can either go to cominghomewell.com and you will see it on their front page, or you can go to the app that's on both Apple and Google. Yes, that's
Yes.
correct, right? Yes. It's on both
Yes.
of those. But you can download the app and you can listen to it in your car, and we can be with you all the time. And there's nothing funnier than I turn it on once in a while and then I'll be like, why am I hearing Leslie? Why am I hearing me? Oh, yeah, we're on the air. It's
It's
still getting
me.
used to that. I know. All right. So, Leslie, we have kind of a unique podcast. So, most of our podcasts are, well, we come at it a little sassy, spicy, and we bring up hard topics, but we put our dark humor twist on it. I would say to kind of keep it lighter and to bring people information in a way that they probably can hear it that maybe tastes a little less bitter. Is that a good way to put it?
I think it's just normal for us. I don't
That's
think it's dark. I think it's normal for
normal.
us.
That's true. We
Yeah,
are
it's our
normalizing.
norm.
We are normalizing healthcare and first responder and military
That's right.
humor. That's what we're doing. That's right. So, all you dark, witty, humored people, you're all right. Don't you worry
That's
about it.
right.
So, today, though, bringing a really cool guest on. I'm actually very excited about this. So, we were talking about what we were going to do for our podcast. And one of the things that started coming up was, as healthcare workers, right? We're rock stars in our field. So we've got it going on our unit. We can read the environment. We can read our coworkers. We know what to do we know when things are getting bad. We've got that, right? We got that finesse, that intuition, that gut, and we're really good. But what happens when we get outside of our familiarity, right? Whether that's our specialty, whether it's in the hospital, in a clinic, wherever that may be. So, what happens when you start seeing family members struggling or got hurt or having a mental health issue or coworkers that are burnt out? And then one day you find out, oh, they're not there anymore. They had to take a break or something worse, right? That
Hmm.
actually happened to me as a nursing school. Short story of this: the nurse, we were at a VA mental health unit, and I was doing my clinicals up there. I was terrified. You take away a stethoscope and then say, go fix somebody, right? And I was like, holy cow. And this nurse kept approaching me and would just start talking to me at lunch. But she was pouring out her heart to me. And I'm
Hmm.
20. I'm like, holy cow. And then one day, because we went there once a week, one day she wasn't there. And I was like,
Right.
oh, where's so and so? Oh, well, she had a little bit of a breakdown. What? She had a mental health breakdown
Hmm.
as 20-year-old student nurse. I just thought she was an oversharer. I had no
Right.
idea that she was actually starting to have a breakdown in front of me. And I didn't know enough to maybe tell another nurse, like,
Right.
hey, I think she needs
Right.
someone to talk to, right? I didn't know.
Well,
I was
yeah,
new.
you probably didn't think it was your place.
Right, right. So this brought up this whole idea of like, how do we identify who is in a crisis? Leslie, your background is a trauma coach. I have
Hmm.
dealt a ton with mental health through my previous jobs, and we can pick that stuff out quickly. Like
Hmm.
we're like, but if you haven't been in those realms, how do you pick up on that stuff early? And what do you do when it's a family member?
Right.
Because sometimes we're just more immune to the signs because we're like, look, unless you're dying, you're fine. Right.
Right.
Oh, don't be so whiny. Don't be so dramatic. Don't be whatever. And we might miss over signs that are there.
Mhm.
So that's what we're going to talk about today. And true to fashion, our executive director knows nearly everybody. It says to me, I know a person. And I said, you do? She goes, yeah, I think this person would be great. And I'm going to introduce him because once I talked to him, he said, hey, I know a person. And I was like, all right, we all knowing people here. This is great. So I'm going to introduce both of them. And then we're going to have this discussion because they're the three of you, the smart people in the room. I probably can just bring up anecdotal stories. So we're going to have this chat and educate people and get them realizing that if you do feel like this, you're not alone. Things happen. So first person we're going to bring on, Andre Miller. He is a Virginia Beach native, lives in Shenandoah Valley right now. Also, military man. He was 22 years in the military. He was in the U.S. Marine Corps, and he is still serving in the Army National Guard. How you went from one to the other, we'll save that
It
for
took a
another
second.
podcast, Andre. And then after he left the Marines, he actually became a Virginia Beach police officer. You're just covering all our bases right now, by the way. And he was there for 3 years. And then he actually went and became a dispatcher for 10 years. There's a whole audience, right, that has to deal with so much right there and wears them out. And right now he's employed with Virginia Department of Veteran Services as a regional coordinator and certified peer specialist. Hey, Andre.
Yes, ma'am. Hello.
How are you?
I am doing. It's Monday, so been trying to wake
Yes,
up
it
all
is.
day.
It is Monday. He jumped on Zoom an hour early. I was like, hey, it's in an hour. Oh, yeah, it's Monday. Sorry.
Yeah, I was multitasking. I was like, oh, I was just click enter and wait for them to bring the screen up. And I looked back and I was like, oh crap, it's not until 1.
You're like, dang it. I was already. So Andre and I talked, we had like a little pre-meet, and then he goes, hey, I know a person that needs to come on. And I said, hey, the more the merrier. Like, we all want to talk about this. And so he tells me about Dr. Angela Porter, and she has a very impressive background. I will not be intimidated, I promise. I'm going to read part of it. You'll see the rest of it on the summary.
It's a lot. Yeah.
Her title is a mouthful. The Director of Suicide Prevention and Opioid Addiction Services at the Virginia Department of Veteran Services. And before that, she was the COO and president of Behavioral Health Alternatives, and that was a private consulting firm. And then she's been a program director for same-day access, outpatient, and crisis services at a local community service board. And then she has been director of counseling at Virginia Union University. She's worked at the Virginia Department of Corrections. Girl, you have got a background. She has got her BS in Administration Justice Psychology from the Virginia Commonwealth University. She has a master's in criminal justice administration from Clark Atlanta and her PhD from Capella University. And if that isn't enough, she's also on the board of directors for the Virginia Sex Offender Treatment Association. And she has over 25 years of experience in the behavioral health field and is a certified sex offender treatment provider. Did I get all
That's
that?
it. That's it.
And that's it. And you sleep when?
I do sleep, but it is 25 years, so we can just spread that out.
I know. I know people say
Good
that.
to
How do you
be
do all
here.
that? I'm like, you don't do
Yeah.
it all at the same time. But it is impressive. Thank you for coming on, Dr. Porter.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think this is awesome. So, conversation to start. I'm going to throw this at Dr. Porter first. How many times have you seen healthcare workers, first responders, could be military first responders, military healthcare workers? How many times have you seen them, one, falling apart themselves and not recognizing it, and two, seeing somebody else falling apart and them also not recognizing it?
I think that number would be countless times, an infinite number, because of what they're faced with day to day and so many different things coming at them. Some of those persons that you mentioned would actually be that person experiencing the difficulty. They may have brought some of that difficulty to work with them from home, but then also seeing that with their coworkers as well and not recognizing it. I think the fast pace that we move at oftentimes will give us that challenge that we're really trying to zone in on what do I need to take care of now, and we lose the big picture.
Yeah, that's a good, that right there. We lose the big picture. Big. So what are some scenarios that that you've seen, Lord have mercy, can't talk today. What are some scenarios that you've seen like, oh boy, we're late in the game, or I wish we would have picked it up sooner, or they're not seeing what I'm seeing, and Leslie, you probably can chime in on that because as the trauma coach, you work with a lot of people that you see stuff and you realize those around them aren't seeing it either. So Dr. Porter, go ahead, and Leslie, please chime in.
Recently I've been thinking a lot about first, do no harm. And so I think a lot of us will forget that we have to definitely take a moment to make sure that how we're interacting, reacting, interjecting into a situation that we're not doing more harm. And I've seen that over the past 25 years in the emergency rooms that I've worked in, the acute psychiatric hospital units that I've worked on. And I'm speaking of not the patients, but the staff that are overworked, overwhelmed, limited resources, coming in maybe on a double shift, especially for the medical staff. And they don't maybe take that time to say, hey, I need 5 or I need 10 minutes before they transition from one client in need to the other. And so a lot of times what you'll find is that they are experiencing compassion fatigue or being overwhelmed with their own stuff without taking a time out. And that impacts the patient or the client in a negative way. Because if they're experiencing mental health crisis, they can feel a little more intensely than a lot of others. They can tell if you're feeling rushed or if you're not able to give them the amount of time that they need. The same thing with a coworker. Sometimes it takes just a moment to say, I see that you're maybe responding a little quickly or short with the client. Do you need 5 minutes? Would you like for me to take this client while you go take a few minutes, take a break? Those things are okay, but they're not seen as okay.
That's a good point. Leslie?
Well, I think what I have seen often is, even though, to your point, Dr. Porter, when you say that they need to take that break or they need to take that time, unfortunately, because we are short staffed, that person that picks up the extra shift or agrees to work that double, that person becomes more valued in the workplace because we're working short staffed. So that it creates like the snowball effect that person needs to take that time out, but yet they become praised because they are working that double shift. So it kind of creates this catch-22 of, yes, they need to take the time out, but then they're being praised because they are working extra, and they become they're getting this extra attention because they're getting this praise because they're working extra, and I don't know how to say it. It's
like a martyr?
They're running off of that praise of being valued when psychologically they need to be resting. So they are enjoying that praise that they are receiving from working extra when they should be resting and taking some time off. I don't know if I said that correctly, but that's that, and then it just creates this snowball effect that they're running off of that sympathetic nervous system, and they're not resting, they're not relaxing, and it just creates this horrible, snowball effect.
Do you think martyr is a good word?
Yeah. Like, like when we say that I haven't used any of my sick time, I have 200 and some sick hours and I haven't used any, and they wear it like a badge of honor.
Yeah.
And that is praised in the first responder healthcare community.
I'm laughing because Andre over there raised his hand like, oh, like me?
Andre, I hope you don't have 200 sick hours over there, buddy.
And Dr. Porter's saying, Bad
Right,
idea.
right,
She can find you, Andre. She lives in your building somewhere.
right.
Oh no, I've gotten better about it.
Well, what's your take on this? Because you got the military, you and I have the military background, right? And we both know that. And you have healthcare. I mean, you're a dispatcher, police officer, too, that first responder side too. So we're doubly messed up, right? We're definitely,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, I definitely call it like a superhero complex. Like you want to save the world, and I
yeah,
mean, who
Yeah.
doesn't? You know, that's probably like the best, self praising you can give yourself is like, I did a great job today. I saved this many people, and you come back in tomorrow to do even a better job. I think a lot of us in these job fields were here because they always say it takes a special person. Obviously, when you're sitting there at work, you're like, that's a load of crap.
Yeah.
But when you step back and you actually step outside, you look back and you're like, okay, it really does take a special person to do this job because you basically get paid to absorb negativity for
Right.
10, 12 hours a day, whether it be somebody's just sad or death or whatever the case may be, or you just walk into a chaotic situation and you're there to be that happy medium for everybody
Yeah.
so they can walk away feeling okay. But we never take out that second. I think, well, at least when I was a cop, I think I had a healthy way of coping with it. Obviously, alcohol being one because the Marine Corps
Mhm.
teach you how to drink. So, and they teach you that's the best way to cope with a lot of issues. But then I would go home. You go home to your spouse, and flat out, I was a straight asshole. Like that was me for 3 years. Like, but these are things that I can't take out on people at work because I need a job and I don't want to go to jail myself. So, hey, I'll just come here and we'll argue about nothing now all of a sudden. So,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. And this person, obviously, usually your family members, your close friends, they actually kind of end up taking it from you because they
Yes.
know that to them that's a way of helping you relieve that stress. But in the same breath, they're kind of damaging a lot of things, especially in your personal life. So
Well,
Yeah.
and the military and medical, the statement has come up many times. Somebody's like, "Oh, and this happened," and we know if they're too dramatic or emotional, invariably somebody will turn around and go like, "But did you die?" And
Right.
and we're gonna shut it down just like that. Well, did you die? Well, then you're fine, right?
Right.
And that kind of leads me into when you said coming home, right? And we have our family, and we do tend to take stuff out on them because they're for some amount of time a safe space until they finally get done with our bullshit, and then they're like, "Have a good day," right? And so what I hear when we're talking, we're running into compassion fatigue, right? And so then we come home, and I joke with my kids, like if something happens to them, my son cut his foot one time, and it was right on the inside of the pinky toe, and it's because he was on his scooter without socks. I mean, without shoes on. And I told him, you can go barefooted except when you're on your bikes and all that stuff. So he comes in, cuts his toe, and he's crying, and I look at him. And my first thing is like, is he breathing? Yes, because he's still crying, and he's crying. So he's feeling pain. So everything works. This is how I'm assessing him.
Mhm.
And that leads me to, well, sit up on the counter, and and then I look and I can see his bone, and I'm like, huh. And then my first thought was, well, it didn't cut the foot off. That's good. Right. So now we're all going to live and we're going to keep body parts. And then that turned me into lecturing him for 2 minutes about him
Mhm.
wearing his shoes and blah, blah, blah before I ever touched him because I already knew he wasn't going to die. So you're going to get a lecture because I have a captured audience. And now we're going to move forward and go to the ER and get taken care of. Now, somebody that civilian be like, that's messed up. Andre's over there like nodding his head like, because I probably have some level of compassion fatigue at that point, right? I'm probably like, dude, you're not dying. It's a cut. We're going to move on. You can put some stitches in it and we'll be just fine. Because I am measuring badness according to death or permanent damage, of which neither of those existed, you know? So let's talk about that. Now we're at home, and let's talk about this compassion fatigue and what you guys see happens. Do you see people that have missed signs with their own family or friends or their coworkers, and what happens? So, Andre, go ahead. You're nodding your head there.
so go ahead, Dr. Porter.
Oh, go ahead.
Just thinking about what you did, detox is you actually did a triage.
Yeah.
Mhm.
without knowing it.
Mommy
So
triage.
we triaged him without knowing it, but
Right.
we have to remember that there's a human element in that
Right.
as so part of your triage was not, is he upset? Is he
Right.
hurt emotionally? Is that pain causing him to have that emotional reaction? And so that's what we take out of it sometimes because we're exposed to the extremes. Working as a crisis worker, if I go in and do an evaluation, it would be different in the outcome than if an outpatient therapist were to walk in who sees things on a lesser level than me as the crisis worker. I'm going to downgrade what I see potentially if I'm not aware because I'm used to seeing the worst of the worst.
Well, you're removing emotion because we can't have emotion and function in a lot of the scenarios that we work.
Very
So
true.
even though that
Right.
was her child, she didn't have empathy. She removed emotion because emotion, we can't have emotion and work in traumatic situations.
Now that's a good point because I'll tell you the other part that happened. My husband had gone TDY. He was 2 hours up the road. He had just left. And this always happened to me. Like nothing bad happens when he's around, it's when he goes. And so in my head, I'm like, damn it, he's gone. I got to handle all this. And I did. I had to be a nurse. That was it. Like I didn't have to, was I mean to him? No, I wasn't mean to him. And when I lectured him, it was like, dude, you're supposed to, whatever, whatever. Okay, let's go. But take the similar scenario at the beach. My child, sometimes I wonder how he's alive, gets smacked by a jellyfish. Kid you not. Those blue, I can't remember the name of him. But anyways, he's out in the water and we see him kind of like screaming and arching up. That's a bad sign, right? And I'm like, whoa. And there's a guy out there that sees him and doesn't go to him, right? So my husband's running for the water. He's pulling him out. He's crying, sits down. Thank God he had a t-shirt on over him, but that thing got him good. I mean, it lashed him up. And we're both there. And my reaction, I looked at my husband and I'm like, do something. That's my reaction. I literally went emotional and I could not until he all of a sudden says, Mom, I'm really hungry. And it like reset me. And I'm like, oh, you're going to live. That was my measurement. I kid you not. I mean, I'm being vulnerable here. They're probably like, oh, she's whack job. No, he said, I'm hungry. And I'm like, well, no dying person is hungry. I can assure you that. I wanted him to pee on him or something. I don't know what I wanted, but go ahead, Andre.
I think normally as far as, when we get home and, I think looking at how we miss signs sometimes, I tend to, in my house, you hold your spouse, you put them on a different pedestal than you do everybody else. So they're not really like your clients or your patients because I think it's, when I was a cop or a dispatcher, just in the public safety room as well, you just kind of expect them to learn from you and kind of become what you are almost. So, I'm thinking like, okay, I'm living with a cop or I'm living with a dispatcher because you hear these stories all the time, so you should know them. So I shouldn't
Right.
expect you to have to go down this route, with me having to talk you out of trouble or whatever. But I did have kind of a wake up call to some extent because you realize they're not you. When they call you
Right.
and they're on the side of the road with a flat tire and the gas station's right there or they ran out of gas. It's like, why don't you just walk across the street and get gas? So you do realize that they don't handle things the same way you do, or they don't process it the same way. As far as like missing signs, I'll share a quick story. So as far as when I was in the Marine Corps, you know, go back to the barracks, every night's a party. And we were basically sitting there drinking. And my last roommate before I left North Carolina to go to Japan, he exhibited signs of suicide constantly, especially when we started drinking. And, I think part of this is, I'm literally sharing my ignorance here for, when I was in my, early 20s, but,
Right.
he basically showed us several signs, as far as everything from, he would disappear and he would go sit in the bathroom and cut his wrist open. And we'd go in there, we sit down and talk to him for a second, and then we pop him back up, put him back outside on the catwalk with us and hand him another beer. That was our way of taking care of him. We did get over to Japan, and finally, that's when I was in Okinawa with him or I was arriving in Okinawa for a detachment type mission of some sort. And basically, when I got there, obviously looked him up because I knew he was there. And yeah, sure as crap, he hung himself with the pull-up bars that day right outside of his shop. So, I think a
Wow.
lot of that could have been prevented, but those signs were there. But I think it was a thing of, we are the same. We went through the same training. We're the same person. So you have that same amount of resilience when in actuality he didn't. So
Right.
yeah.
If you could bottle resilience and hand it out equally, we would win the Nobel Peace Prize and be very rich people. Because I'll tell you, my husband, he's also prior military, and he was a medic. That's why I yelled at him to do something. You're the medic, do something. but I totally lost what I was gonna say to you on all that. Oh, I remember what it was. Lord have mercy, a mommy moment. PTSD. He had deployed a lot, right? And he had another person that deployed a lot. And up until this point, you say PTSD, and he kind of like stick his nose up at like, oh, for God's sakes, like everybody, they get coached on how to claim it and blah, blah, blah. And I'm over here working in an environment where I am dealing with a lot of this, right? So I have a whole other picture. And I said, listen, I said that if we could figure out who would trigger and when, we'd all be very rich people. But I said, we don't know that. We don't understand people's resilience. Because really, by all statistics, my husband should be dealing with that and doesn't. Sleeps well, and does well and functions well. And I'm like, I don't understand how some of the things you've been through and you're not. This other guy, same setup as him, deployed a lot, similar backgrounds. The only difference was my husband had been a paramedic before, and this guy hadn't. When they go deploy, when there's, this, Andre, when there's like a mass casualty or planes are coming in, it's like all hands on board to help bring them in. So people from other units and other jobs would come over and help them just carry litters in. And that's what this guy did. And he said that's the only difference between him and I. He's like, I didn't do it. I had done it as a paramedic and there was tons of hands. So I just let them do it. Okay. So they come back. This guy's doing fine from what they can tell. Daughter gets in a car accident. And my husband said at that moment, he said the guy told him, he walked into the ER. The girl was going to survive. She did have injuries. There was some blood, but she was going to make it and be okay. And he said all he could see was helicopter blades and blood. And at that moment, he triggered. And he literally went from, I say hero to zero lightly, but I just mean like he decompensated so quickly. He ended up in a medical board and out the door. And my husband looked at me and I said, and that is what I'm trying to tell you. He goes, in like 2 weeks, it was a different person. I'm like, I know. That's the mystery we don't have figured out. Right. So when you see this and you're going, I kind of went off track a little bit, but coming home, dealing with friends, family, coworkers, do you feel that our compassion is less for them?
I think what tends to happen is that you're operating in a certain mode at work, right? Because that's that title that you have. When you get home, it's almost as if you switch, but not necessarily in a good way. I'll give you an example. I had one child, and when I came through the door, she and the dog would just come toward me. And so my natural response was, whoa, let me get in the door. Can I just have 5 minutes? So of course, when I had the second child, I heard her telling him, why are you going up to mom? Can you just give her 5 minutes?
Oh, wow.
And it hit me. And I had to then rephrase that and say, okay, if there's something really, really important, that's fine. But if you're coming to ask for something, or can we go get ice cream, things of that nature, just give me 5. So I had to reframe that, because as much as I was reacting to the, whoa, let me get in the door, what that meant to them was, whatever we have going on is not that important for the first 5 minutes of mom coming in the house. So we don't always understand it from that perspective. Andre mentioned that we hold our family to a higher accord, but we also think they know what we're dealing with and they know how we think. I'm a plan A, plan B, plan C type of person. So when my kids come to me now, they know they better have thought through plan A, B, and C, right?
Mhm.
But what does that teach them? Does it teach them that when they get to plan D, it's time to freak out and take things out of perspective, and then that resiliency maybe goes out the window? So we have to be careful how we message things within our families, because we don't want to be desensitized to their lived experience, because they don't have our lived experience, right? And that resilience piece, I've done therapy with people that said, well, my brother, he's a police officer. Why am I in trouble? Why am I always breaking the law or having breakdowns? We were raised by the same parents. We were raised the same way. And it has to do with that resiliency. And some of that you're born with, and some of it does need to be taught. And we don't necessarily do that.
Ooh, that's a good one. That's that's one to think about because, well, no, it brought me back to a podcast I had heard, and this gentleman is an ultra marathoner, prior Marine, and doing all these great things. Like he does ultra marathons. He's trying to raise money for his daughters to get lights up in their softball fields. And he's a great dad and just a really cool human being. You hear his story, like he escaped to the military to get away from the abuse, right? Has a brother makes different choices. And some of the choices resulted in murder, and he's back in jail. And they both had a dad that was not there. He was in jail. They both had the same dad. They both had the same upbringing. And one of them is thriving and has this beautiful family, and the other one's in jail for murder. Same family. So that's an interesting statement that you make. Some of us have a certain level of resiliency. Do you think it's due to like the order of birth? Firstborn, secondborn?
You can
No.
see some confirmation in that, but
Oh,
I would not say scientifically. What I will say though is that we are born with the DNA and the genetics, the whole personality makeup that we have. We are born with that, whether you believe that it happened in utero or it was just the fusion of those genetics. So that doesn't mean that we can't do something about it, right? So that
Agreed.
means that there are different things that therapists can do to assist with resiliency, to help you be able to manage emotional distress that you may not have just received from your environment.
God,
I
Leslie.
I think we're continually experiencing new things, new events. And if we don't continually work on ourselves and process those events, then the things that we expose our children to, I think that that is where, we talk about, okay, the things that, to Andre's point, we go home and we may say things or expect things out of our family, because I know as far as I'm concerned, when I was working in critical care and my children were very small, and as far as Dr. Porter coming home and saying, your children, just give me 5 minutes, if if I hadn't worked on myself and realized that I had to process what I was dealing with so that I could deal with my children better, then then their outcome would have been different. But I've had to work on me so that my children's outcome is better and different, because I have learned that now I have a daughter that sometimes I want to dismiss her emotions because the hardness of me, as someone that's worked in critical care for 20 years, wants to say, get over it. It's not that big
Mhm.
of a deal. But I mentally hear myself saying, no, don't dismiss her emotions. Just because you're a hard ass doesn't mean that she has to be. Because I've lived through these things doesn't mean that she has the same experiences and she can process these things the same way. Or does she ever need to process them the same way? So why do we think, as first responders, healthcare workers, that that our kids are able to process these things the same way? Why do we think that? So I think that it's a continuous, we constantly have to work on ourselves. We're constantly being exposed to traumatic events, and we have to constantly process these things, work with professionals so that the outcome is different for our children, so that the outcome is different for us. Because if not, we're just messing up everybody. Like everyone around us is not coming out with positive outcomes. It's just, I think that that's just the general, that's why we're missing things in our families, because we can set tunnel vision and we can say, okay, I'm going to run off my sympathetic nervous system and I'm not going to work on myself and I'm not going to process these emotions that I'm feeling. And then I'm not going to pick up on things around me because I'm just running full speed ahead, and I'm not going to, see the things that's going on around me. I think that we have to constantly be working on ourselves in order to see the things that are going on within our households.
I might be erring on the other side of that because I'm watching so vigilantly, maybe because of what I do.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
watching everything that everyone does. That again can lead to compassion fatigue if you don't know how to turn it off.
True. Yeah.
Good, Andre.
Yeah, and I think it's so as far as like working on yourself, it's I mean, I think that's something that I've recently just started doing. So maybe I'm coming to grips with it. I think like your life experiences eventually like pile up on you.
Oh, definitely.
You can fight it off as long as you can, but eventually you're going to crumble underneath that weight. I'm starting to, last year I think was when my first realization of that. When I literally had this stint of anger, and it was a swelling anger, and I couldn't do nothing to stop it. I couldn't talk myself out of it. There was nothing I could do. I felt myself losing control. And to me, that was scary because I'm like, a lot of bad things can happen if I don't get this in check. So, that was the first time I actually went to a counselor therapist with the VA. And, it kind of goes back to as far as working on yourself constantly, like, I think to actually sit there and talk to an impartial party, for an hour and not be judged based on what's coming out of your mouth, just to be able to get it out was more than enough, I think, to kind of like, help me reset a little bit. But then obviously, I had that moment where I'm like, oh, I'm feeling great. I don't need this anymore. So I walk off. Oh yeah, it comes back. So it's not, it's a constant thing. It's not over yet. So, you find myself back in there talking to a person again. And it's like, okay, I guess I do need to do this on a regular because this is my only outlet. I would love to take it home. You don't want to dump all that stuff on your family.
No, and me personally, I've encouraged my kids. My kids are adult children, and I'm like, go to therapy once a week. Because I am 100% sure that I've messed them up at some point in their lives.
The goal is just for low-level therapy, not inpatient treatment.
Right. No. Just go talk to someone, because I know that me being in healthcare, coming home with that leather exterior has made them to where they are not processing their emotions, because I wasn't. But that's the household they grew up in. So now they are in their 20s. And I'm encouraging them, and I see what I've done. They're perfectionists. They have they are, very hard on themselves. I did that to them. And I didn't mean to do that to them. And I've had that conversation with them, but now I'm encouraging them. Hey, please go once a week, go talk to someone, because you're going to come out better in the long run. That's definitely, there's no shame in that.
I think there is like I always tell people, it took me roughly about 20 years to go see counseling. It's, in these job fields, we consider ourselves, we're I don't know, top of the game, I guess, as far as like being able to be resilient and process emotions, when in actuality, we probably all suck at it because we have some like weird way of coping with, with whatever it is we're dealing with.
Look at the podcast you're on. It's my own therapy session right here. Dr. Porter did not know
here together.
Dr. Porter didn't know what she was walking in on.
It's interesting though to think about how we teach those around us in terms of how they should deal with their emotions. And so sometimes you will go from one extreme to the other, right? And it's good if you can try to find some kind of a balance, maybe somewhere in the middle, not perfection, but balance. And I don't like to use the word normal, But I think it's really important to meet people where they are, even at home.
Mhm.
And so that good self-care puts you in a better place to do that. You know, as a therapist, I'm also a mandated reporter, and family
Look out,
family will,
Leslie.
right? Family will call and say, "Oh, well, so and so experienced this, and this kid said this happened to him," but they have no details about what happened. So I'm going, okay, I'm asking my questions, right, so that I can make that call. And I make the call, I still don't have the answers that I need to have. So I call the person back. It was my sister, and I said, "I want you to take this in the right way, but please don't call me again if you don't have names, phone
Yeah.
numbers, relation. Please don't call me because what your phone call did was to have me then be 3 hours on the phone trying
Mhm.
to get all of these other people in place to take care of that kid, which I would have done whether I was a mandated reporter or not. But I didn't have any information. So my stress level went up.
Mhm.
Did I feel like I accomplished helping that kid out? No,
Mhm.
I didn't, because that person called me just, oh, by the way, what do I do if this? You don't do anything. I have to do it now because you
Mhm.
passed that on to me,
You,
right?
you bring up a good point. Like, we're all mandatory reporters. Like,
Yeah.
if we see something,
Right.
so I mean, I worked in the ER and see this child come in, like, that doesn't look right, and then we can't ignore it. And it's always safer to go through the process to make sure everything's okay than not, right? So we're all in that pickle, right?
And it's a
Mhm.
sensitive place because she didn't want to give me names and addresses. And I said, but you called me knowing who I am, knowing
Mhm.
what I'm going to do. So that puts you in a very delicate place when you are a mandated reporter or you are that person who knows what to do to get some relief.
So you bring up an interesting thought
You can't
process.
really call me and vent about
Right.
children or, in
What
crisis.
what happens when, like I said, at healthcare, we are all mandatory reporters, right? What happens when you see your coworker severely struggling? What do you do?
So
How do
So,
we?
unfortunately, with mandated reporters, that particular piece of it, unless we saw them abuse a kid or an adult, it doesn't fall under mandated reporting per se. But I think that's a great question. What do you do? And that's going more toward an ethical dilemma.
What if
Mhm.
it's mental health? What if it's like you think that their mental health is putting? I'll actually give you a scenario. I don't know why all these things happen to me, but it happened to me, sort of. And this was actually an interesting one. It was a friend of mine, and I actually did not know she was my neighbor until late in the game that she was dealing with alcoholism. She was also a nurse. And by the time I got involved, and I didn't put myself in this. I'm just going to tell you, I was pulled into this. When I kind of sorted everything out, I had to decide, am I reporting? Because now I realize, holy cow, at that point, she took herself away from work. She was not at work. She was not anywhere near anybody. And I remember saying something to a physician I had worked with. I was in the reserve at the time, and she's like, and I kind of told her the scenario because the story is long, but it was wild. And she's like, "Did you report?" And I looked at her and I said, "I didn't." And she looked at me. She goes, "You're a mandatory reporter." I'm like, "Hold on." I said, "There is more to that. She is not in healthcare right now. She is getting treatment. She is taking care of herself. It's ugly. It's not pretty right now, but she's not doing anything. And when she was in the environment, she was doing insurance, but that still can cause other issues. And so I opted not to. But I will tell you that I sat for a very, very long time, and it was a major stressor for me to decide. Because if I would have remotely thought, I know I would have. I know I would have picked the phone up because I would rather have somebody hating me
Absolutely.
and know that they're safe, and then the people that are around are safe, than
Yes.
to try to make somebody feel falsely safe, right? So what do we do in those scenarios when we see stuff happen? What do you have you seen it, Andre? Have you been in any of those scenarios?
So as far as coworkers, yeah, a couple of times. So I know there was one where, there was, I think, some form of domestic violence going on.
Mm.
She did come to work with a black eye one time, and that cynical coworker attitude that we all have, it's like, oh my God, what did you trip over the cat again? So
Giving them
she
the
was joking
excuse.
about it.
Mhm.
Exactly. And, this person laughed and, kind of shrugged it off as if it was a joke. And, but, they kind of said, hey, I had an accident, I tripped in my house, and, they hit their face on the table. And at the end of the day, we come to learn after this person escaped their abuser, we learned that there was actual domestic violence involved. So I think, yet again, I blame everything on my youth, but looking back, they're always learning lessons, and I'm thankful that I have the ability to learn from them, so that way they hopefully don't happen again, or I don't allow them to happen again. But sometimes these things are just new things that you're introduced to, especially I think in a coworker or family dynamic, because I think that mindset when I'm at work, I'm at work. So obviously there's protocols set in place for when these things happen. But when it's one of your own, and if they're, obviously if they're not, bleeding out or dying or something like that, it's their personal life at that point. So now I think you start to question, what is the protocol for this? Like, how far do I actually take this?
Well, let me ask this quick question. What would your wiser self do today?
The wiser self of me today,
Mm-hmm.
ask directly, like, are you okay? Or, or what's going on at home? And try to read. At this age now, I'm a little bit better at reading people. So I'm not going to say I'm the best, but I think in this job, when you're working with people, you become very good at being able to read people, and you can tell when they're bullshitting. So that is one of the gifts I love walking away with. Are you always right? No, but you really do get a fine sense of like, okay, something is not right with this person. I need to maybe interject, or at least let them know that somebody is watching, so that way they know they have an outlet or someone to reach out to.
Okay, Leslie, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say that if you are in a management role, you don't get to choose whether you are uncomfortable or comfortable with those types of situations. That is your responsibility. So it is your job. You said, hey, coach, put me in. I want to be in charge of this department. You're the gatekeeper for those type of situations. So definitely know what the policies and protocols are for those situations.
And to both of what you just said kind of combined, I was in management when I was a nurse, and at one point I was, and I remember saying this to leadership or just in various conversations that would come up. I said, I'm always a big believer of knowing somebody's character, because when that changes, then I know there's something wrong. So if somebody's character is like, good morning, and how are you, and engaging, and pretty much, bopping along, and now they're coming in a little more withdrawn, maybe not saying good morning every morning, maybe just like, oh, I'm having a bad day. Okay, you get a little grace. But if you see trends or consistencies or anything like that, or, go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, and that's with you saying that. So this is like one of my biggest pet peeves with the world the way it is today, as far as technology. Because I always tell people, especially soldiers, like that is probably one of the biggest changes in the military is nobody actually does like face to face talking
Yeah.
anymore. It's all texting and Snapchat and who knows what else going on. So I always tell soldiers, I was like, you cannot read emotion through a text message. They can send emojis all day long, but you cannot really tell what's going on with that person if you don't talk to them.
Yeah.
Trying to get them to actually engage as we are designed to do as people. That's probably more of a challenge than it should be, but I stress that highly. Like, just I think people nowadays have just gotten so out of touch and just unable to communicate. Even like I think in homes, like I've gone to people's homes before for cookouts and stuff, and the whole freaking family sitting there texting. I was like, nobody says one word, and you feel awkward. So it's just
so in the military, and I don't, every branch probably has their own type of training. We have, the Air Force had POW training. We called it Ass Beat School, is what we all not fondly referred it to. And they basically send you to this school and you get to play POW. Super fun. and you get to be thrown into walls and stuffed in barrels and like things like that, like super fun stuff, right? And it's you have to escape and evade. It's to teach, if you ever got into that situation, how you would respond, right? Because we can't have people like being singing birds, and we have to have people that are just going to be able to handle themselves in a abnormally high stressful situation, right? So here's the interesting thing. I know a little about it because I actually dealt with some of the people, because people do get hurt in it. I mean, there's been broken bones and things like that. It's real play, but one of the things that I don't know if a lot of people know, but I had found out that they actually monitor all the instructors. So there is hundreds of cameras around, hundreds and hundreds of cameras. And those cameras are watching, obviously, for the student safety. That is priority, even though things happen, but student safety and instructor safety. They count every time an instructor puts somebody into a wall. Every time there is any strikes, so they have special, scenarios so they can do stuff with them without hurting them, right? So every time they, whatever it is, pushed in a wall or yelled at or something physical, they get it, they count them. And if they notice that somebody's counts are going way up, they pull them out. They actually pull them away to find out what's going on, because you're one of those instructors, yours no personal life. They gotta know everything going on, what's going on at home, what's going on in your personal life, what stresses are you dealing with, whatever. Figure out where it's at. If possible, remedy the situation or put them in kind of I say timeout, but like, get them decompressed. And a lot of them, when they go home, they have a decompression room. So you spend all day being an aggressor.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come home to your 3 little kids.
Wow.
Not a good environment, right?
No.
So the rule is that they go, well, I don't know if it's a rule, but my understanding is that these guys have decompressor rules. They go home, they decompress, and then they re-engage with their family. It is very, very highly psychologically watched.
But at what point is this normal?
But look at the environments we go into. I mean, you can ask Andre, being a Marine, and
exactly.
Welcome to indoctrination. I mean,
and
right,
then we wonder why
why we're like this,
why we are the way we are.
And I think it's funny. I always say like this job with DVS, this is probably the first job where I've ever heard the word self-care. Any job prior to this, I had no clue what it was. I was like, what the hell are y'all talking about self-care? So it's because you're used to going, and then you get your break when you go home and take your nap. So right. This was the first job where I had that. But, I think after experiencing this, obviously it's going to be hard to go to a job where they don't practice this anymore. So if I ever, leave.
That means you won't leave ever.
Yeah, so, correct.
But
we are
that's
being
a good
recorded.
point.
Dr. Porter's, she got your number now.
That's a good point though, Andre, because really talking about self-care, we understand how important it is. I wanted to say about the previous piece of the mandated reporter versus ethical dilemmas. We can always use supervision. And I think Leslie mentioned this about being in management, but you can also go to management. There's always someone that you can reach out to, another colleague. Even if you go to your supervisor, that's going to be in confidence unless the supervisor deems that there's an act now scenario, right? But reach out to that person. A lot of times we have these things going on in our heads, and we're having conversations in our own heads, and we don't get anywhere, but frustrated, and the problem doesn't get solved. So reach out, use that supervision to find out, is this an ethical dilemma or is it a mandated reporter situation? Because the laws on mandated reporting are very specific. A lot of times things don't fit into that. It fits into an ethical dilemma. Now I need to have another professional discuss that ethical dilemma and possible options and outcomes. Either way, dealing with that day to day, all day, we definitely have to work with self-care. And that could be different for other people. What I've always told people that I've trained is It doesn't include sex, alcohol, drugs, right? I want
Sorry,
you to tell
Andre.
me things that you
Sorry,
do for
my facial
self-care,
expression
but
flipped. My
take
apologies.
these out for now. Just take those out as your main self-care. What do you do? And then I hear fishing, you know, my program gives grants out to veteran service organizations to assist with suicide prevention and opioid addiction services. We've provided grants to fishing with vets, equine, equestrian assisted therapies, hyperbaric chamber therapies. There are all sorts of things, dogs, training dogs that help people to relax. So whatever, if it's knitting, painting, whatever it is to help you to relax, that will put you in better stead when you go home so that you can separate and take that head off so that you can see if something's going on with your family or friends.
So, which all of this discussion, we have all kind of hit on all of our issues and us still having issues, and we wonder why we still miss our loved ones having struggles. I mean, it sounds like we still don't have a good grip on our problems and our struggles. So it's no wonder that we are missing that our family members are struggling.
I,
So I mean, I think that was the point of the podcast was
well,
how do we see that our family members are struggling? If we ourselves are not at grips with us and our struggles, how do we know that our family members are struggling?
go ahead, Andre.
Yeah. Now that I feel super bad for that statement, but your very true statement. No,
No, don't feel bad. It was super funny. I was just like,
no way to
oh,
mop this one
out of
up.
luck.
I was
It's
going to say
bullets to bad pans. You got to put the humor in it. Yeah.
one of the things I'm trying to practice this year. So obviously, yay for getting older. I used to not want to think about this when I was 22, but now that I'm 45, I really don't have a choice. So I just have to accept it. But yeah, yay for getting older, and I'm actually enjoying it because I think it does come with some wisdom. That's the part I'm appreciating. Granted, your body's breaking down, but you still appreciate the wisdom. So,
Right.
one of my New Year's resolutions. I know we do this every year, and a lot of people stop doing them because they're just like, oh, it's a waste of time. You never follow through with it. So I try to do something a little bit more realistic this year. So my New Year's resolution this year was obviously a work-life balance, because work truly consumes me if I allow it, and I think in our household we both allow work to consume us. So in that sense, with I think figuring out that work-life balance for myself, one, because human services, working with people in general, you take that crap home with you, whether you try to or not, it's going to follow you home. You're laying there in bed, you're going to be thinking about something at work that you could have done better or that didn't happen or it's going to have to happen tomorrow or something like that. So it follows you home regardless. But, with my goal this year, it's so that I can focus a little bit more on, my spouse, focus a little bit more on my personal life to, I guess, I know normal is not a good word, but you have to kind of live that normal life that I see everybody like Facebooking about or whatever the case, like I'm not comparing my life to theirs, but I do want to be able to go on vacations. I do want to go away for couples weekend or have a normal date night or something like that, just like the stuff we used to do before our life got so chaotic with resolving everybody else's problems. That's kind of what we all do for a living, resolving other people's problems. So right now, so far, is it working? Our relationship at home is better, if I can be a little personal for a second. But yeah, we are getting along better. We're talking more. And I think that attention to one another is genuinely there versus as to where before, I think we just we had this rule last year and the year before where it's like, okay, on Friday, you get 15 minutes to bitch to me and that's it. So 15 minutes was all you got. After 15 minutes, shut your mouth. I don't know anything else about it. But it wasn't genuine. It was just literally like, hey, get it off your chest. But I don't think we were really truly trying to connect with one another. We were just letting each other talk. And go ahead. I'm sorry, ma'am. Go ahead.
No. Go finish your thought. You just segued into another question. Go ahead.
So yeah, basically so far it's working. I'm working a little bit more on being a little bit more spiritual too. So I mean, those are the cases of working with myself. I'm not sure if that's going to work for everybody, but for me, it has allowed me to be a little bit more attentive than I have been in the past, in my own personal life, which, like I say, I think we're kind of, we're kind of enjoying the fruit from that right now. Now, it's still early in the year. So, you know, summer, and we still got the holidays to come. So, those are usually chaotic times. But I think we're both equally like pushing in, and we're actually practicing and trying to. And obviously, thank goodness for therapy too, because I get to actually go talk, and I get more than 15 minutes there. So I think I have a lot of outlets to release if I need to, so that way, at home I can be that person, or we can be that couple that I think we want to be. So.
So no, I appreciate the vulnerability. I really do, because this is not talked about. Because what we have a 2-word sentence that all of us, military, medical, first responders, I'm fine, right?
Mhm.
I'm fine. I'm fine. It's gonna be fine. All fine, right? So the fact that you're just like, well, damn, it's not all fine, right? And it is, when those 4th and 5th decade contracts come up, I swear to God, the fine print gets finer and they put more stuff in it that we're not aware about. I'm all like, said this. Nobody told me my body was going to do this. Where did that hair come from? What? And what about all this stuff now? Well, because we're wiser and we can process better, which sometimes works to our detriment, I think, sometimes, because now we're processing crap from 15 years ago and we're like, oh, really? Like, I didn't handle it then. I get to handle it now. Yay. Didn't read that in the contract. Stupid contract, right?
I call
But
that the boomerang.
yeah, that's a good name for it. I mean, it hits hard. Let me tell you,
Yeah.
whacked me a couple times. I'm like, dang, just when I think, like Andre, you said, like, oh, yeah, body might be breaking down, but I'm wiser. I'm like, yeah, that's the good part. Except that we're wiser. And then we're having this issue. Let me, I want to say this before I forget. I wrote this question down and you all answered it already. Just didn't know it. I put in here, should all of us have therapy? Right? We've already answered with a resounding yes that is true. But I want to bring up a little point. And Leslie and I had a podcast, and we were talking with somebody, and her podcast will be coming out just before yours, actually. And it was a police officer. And she made a comment that just hit me so hard. She was taken out of commission from her police work because she was struggling, and she had good leadership that actually saw it.
Mhm.
And they said, we're pulling the plug. We see this. Of course, she had to go through the whole grieving process, but at the end was like, they were right. But what she said to me kind of blew my mind, or said to us, Leslie and I were on there, when she said, I was in therapy before all this happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was, and that literally blew my mind. And I said, but you weren't putting in the work, would you? She goes, nah, I was lip servicing the whole thing. And so I appreciated her being straight up with it, right, Leslie?
Yeah.
And she was awesome. And it stuck with me for the longest time. I'm like, damn.
She was just checking a box.
Checking a box. So when I say, should we all have therapy? Yes, we should all have therapy. But I think the answer is like, yes, we should all be putting in the work. However that looks, self-care, putting in that hard work. It is hard work, right? Anybody that tells you otherwise, you're like, you're not in it. Trust me. It's sucky. So I don't know if Dr. Porter, as you as a therapist, she's smirking already. I think she already knows what I'm going to ask her. Have you seen this? Like, can you see the difference in the people that are coming in, lip servicing versus putting in this work?
Yeah, I used to have a magic wand here that I could use. I think, yeah, it broke, but
You use it too
it broke
much.
because, yeah, I couldn't fix people who weren't putting in the work. There's no fixing from this perspective. I don't do the fixing. I'm just the conduit as a therapist. So the
Okay.
work has to come.
On that note, thank you for saying that. So in my last job, I acquired a whole bunch of therapist friends, and I keep acquiring them. There has got to be some sign here, but I have a lot of therapist friends. And I remember this comment from a couple of them saying to me, I don't fix anybody. I don't have that power. And anybody that thinks they can, I should not be in this field. We give tools, we show you how to use the tools, how to best apply the tools for you in your journey. And we help strengthen you to make that tool a habit. But if you're not willing to take the tool and listen to how it's supposed to be used and try it out, it's not going to be perfect. You got to try and try. The tool is useless.
Well, if you think about the toolbox, for those of us who want to be able to leave work, go home, be with our primary families as well as extended families at times, and be able to maybe see if they're reaching out, if they need help, we've got to do, you can open up that toolbox. It could be self-care in there. It could be the boundaries. Don't forget that, building resiliency, some ways in which we can build up distress tolerance so that we can put our things aside, and separate. The work-life balance piece is also in that toolbox, so that when we are home, we are present.
Yeah.
When we leave work, we are present. And I'm, people look at me like I'm crazy when I cut my work phone off at a certain time, because I'm not working crisis anymore. I'm not working
Yay.
crisis.
Right.
So there are some people that'll get a crisis phone call, but it's not me, right? We put 988 press 1 out there for veterans if they're in crisis. But for me, as the director of the program, there's very little that will happen after 6-ish, where I can cut that work phone off and cut it on early the next day to find out if there's something I need to do. And people look at me and they're like, you do that? I have to do that. Mainly because others don't know how to not text and send emails in the middle of the night, right? We have to set that aside.
Here's my secret. I send the best thing that was ever invented was the schedule button.
Schedule send.
I love it because my little squirrely brain will forget at another time. And so I'll write it and then I schedule it for like 8 a.m. so I look normal.
I thank you. I love it.
Now, I have this question for Dr. Porter, and I know the answer for this, but I want to ask it because I want you to say this. So how important is it to find purpose outside of the uniform and outside of the job?
You absolutely have to, because what you think about it, if I were to take that away, who am I? What's your identity?
You'd be naked.
With your job set aside. What is your identity?
How many mental health crises do you believe comes from people who don't have an identity outside of that work life, and then that's taken away and then they don't know who they are? How often do you see that?
Definitely daily. It's extremely important, because if your work life is more important than your home life, things are out of balance already. I know we spend a great deal of time at work, so we definitely need to have some homeostasis there. But that means that the time that we have outside of our work, we really have to maximize those hours, right? We definitely have to do that and have something to live for outside of work, for sure. Andre, you had your hand up.
Yes, ma'am. So, and it's funny you say that. So, I mean, I feel like you guys are talking about me a little bit. So
it's all for you, Andre.
I don't even know you, Andre.
But we love you anyway.
I'm trying to Google myself before the basketball player pops up. I'm nobody. So but yeah, in reference to the identity thing, I mean, that's a lot of people play it down like it's not an actual thing, but that is so freaking true, especially with, especially in the human services field, anything in the military. That's where those things are so true, because you have this job where you're doing a lot of great things, and to let that go, and have to find something else that may not be as meaningful. I think, that is like, that really hits your pride really hard. So, like within my group of friends, this will kind of boast, I think, the importance of like actually genuinely listening to somebody, how much you can actually help them.
Andre, I think you've done something to your volume.
Yeah,
there.
I was just going to ask where your mic is or something. Go ahead and talk again.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, probably because I turned my head away. I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I remember I had somewhat of a breakdown one night, and my buddy was there with me, and I'm kind of, I guess, I kind of view myself as like, the Black Captain America of our group. So, I'm this superhero. I've had all these roles and stuff that I've played in life and done these things. And I think they kind of, I kind of got the sense that they kind of looked up to me for that reason. Not looked up to me. That sounded kind of conceited, but they kind of looked to me as that guy who's had these jobs and done these things. But I had like a somewhat of a health scare, a few years back, and at that moment, that's when you start to question mortality, you start to question life, you start to question, like, did I just waste my time doing all this stuff when I could have been enjoying life instead of stressing out over all this stuff? But he actually sat there and he genuinely listened to me and gave me some advice, and he's like, dude, just, it doesn't change who you are. The fact that you know this is going to happen or that's going to happen, or you lose this or you lose that, you're still, regardless of the end of the day, you're still Andre. So it doesn't matter what you end up doing. You're still going to be the same person, even though you may not see it. So, I think that point of him listening to me, it kind of helped out. And, not to stray, but I always tell people listening is probably the most powerful thing you can do for somebody. I think for a lot of us as adults, it takes so much to like open up, especially to a loved one, because when it's embarrassing I think, to admit your weaknesses and that you're having a moment of weakness, and that and I think men or women, it doesn't matter. I think it's just embarrassing to tell somebody, hey, I need help. But always tell people, if somebody opens up to you, don't like, hey, I gotta go throw on the food, like we got dinner in 10 minutes. Like, you sit there and you finish listening to them. You have to hear them out. And sometimes they're looking for a response, sometimes they just want you to listen. I've had several people walk in my office, in states of extreme crisis. We're talking like, suicide, homicide and suicide, and literally just sitting there and listening to them. It takes 3 hours out of my day, but guess what? By the end of that conversation, whether it's a one-way conversation or they're looking for input, that person literally walks away with some sort of resolve. Like, they feel like something's been done to help them address their issue, just because I think they were able to talk about it. So, listening, if I can say anything is to the point of this podcast, honestly, listening is the most powerful thing you can do for anybody who you think may be either on the brink of self-destruction, or already there. I think just hearing them out is the best thing you can do. And I always say that, especially in the veteran world, public safety or just human services in general, we have that cynical mindset, but we end up being our own worst enemies, because when somebody comes to you with a problem, it's like, stop being, it's like you make fun of them and you downplay the problem, because they should not be having these problems because you don't have that problem. So. Yes,
great, Andre. And I'd like to add, to listen for understanding, not listening to respond.
Yes, ma'am.
So, see, you guys are just like moving the podcast right where it needs to be. I don't even need to be here. It's like all just moving. You segued right into what, we're going over the hour, but I think the topic is so important. And I really think we don't have this discussion. So my question is, and Andre, you started down this road. What, from our side as healthcare workers, I'm going to ask two questions. I'm going to start with Dr. Porter. One, what are early signs that you see in a coworker, a friend, a family member, whoever, and what can you do? And I think, Andre, you might have just answered that question on the backside of it, is the listening part. Or if you feel like it's more significant, what is the next step you're going to do? Because I will say, and I want to say this in defense of military and everybody that's medical, that's not mental health, they don't necessarily know what to do, right? You might know how to crack a rib, do CPR, set the leg, whatever it is, but you may not know what to do when it comes to the mental health. We get a little weird with that, because to your answer, Andre, like listening to, and what you said, Dr. Porter, listening to understand. Sometimes I think, honestly, we don't want to listen to understand and acknowledge, because if we have to acknowledge that they have an issue, we might be acknowledging that we have an issue. Leslie and I have already acknowledged we have issues, so we're good. But
Well, I think it's a great question, but to give a generally specific answer to that, we should always look at what that person's norm is in terms of their behavior in a particular situation or environment, at home, on the football field, or basketball court or at work. Does this person seem to be out of character today? Right? So
Mhm.
observe, listen, and talk to them. But when you talk to them, it could be something as simple as don't have your feet still moving when you say, "Are you okay today?" Actually stop, give them your full attention, and say, "How are you?"
How
Make
are
eye
you is
contact.
more important, I think, than are you okay?
Yeah. How are you? Because if you say, "Are
Open-ended.
you okay?" That's a one-word answer. Yes,
Mhm.
no. But if you say, "How are you?" I mean, not how are you, but are you okay? And then ask follow-up questions. Really, really, how are you? Are you okay? So you can, even if they give you that one-word answer, you can then follow up again. I remember during COVID, I would post on Facebook, "How are you?" Really. I got so many responses about
Mm.
people having a hard time with the isolation and with the fear, that just them being able to express it by text was relieving to them because someone actually asked, "No, really, how are you?"
Yeah. Nobody asked.
Yeah, nobody asked. And then how can you then know how to act if you don't stop, take the time to say, "How are you really?" And then depending upon their response, that should dictate what you do next, right? Whether that's calling 911, calling 988, press 1 for veterans, whether that's let's go on into the office and maybe call EAP to set you up with some sessions. Many people don't know about the free sessions with EAP. Many people are overwhelmed financially and they don't know that EAP can
What's
assist you with that as
EAP?
well. Employee Assistance Program.
Oh, is that at every hospital or every clinic?
Many of your insurances, if you look on the back under mental health, it will have a number for you to call for employee assistance. It's not just state government, it's with many of the insurance panels.
Wow.
And they
Is
typically will give you 4 to 6 free sessions per person in the home per incident.
Wow. And then in the military side, we have military one source, right? They can
Correct.
call that. And
Yes.
they do, I think up to 10 sessions, I think they do, or
Well,
something. 12, is that what it is? Yeah, somewhere around there.
Phenomenal. Phenomenal.
It's a place to start, right? Even if it's just to
Absolutely.
decompress you. If you're on the edge, I'd rather you talk and take one step back than not talk and take a step forward and maybe your last step, right?
But what you really want to do is do a warm handoff with people, even at home, right? You don't want to just say, "Oh, you need some therapy." I myself, I've made the appointments
Yeah,
for
I've
family
done that
members.
before.
I've
Hmm.
escorted them to the meeting. So do the warm handoff.
That I'll tell you that I could do a whole story on warm handoffs. I am very big on that for 1,000 reasons, and especially the mental health ones. And on the military side, Andre, you'll probably resonate with us. We are shy. We're loud and obnoxious, and our coping is all maladaptive and everything else. But if we're like, hey, there's this thing you can go to, what are we looking for, Andre, right? Like, who's going? Like,
yeah.
I ain't going by myself.
I do accredit and when I do crisis intervention trainings, I always bring this up, but I do give credit to, I think, the newer generation in the military, because they are a little bit different than we were. Like, as far as we
Yes.
didn't want to ask for help because, nobody wanted to be labeled as crazy or whatever within the unit, because you know how fast that word's going to get around.
Yep.
But nowadays, these kids, these young men and women, they, hats off to them. They are not scared to ask for help. If
They
they
don't
need
take our
help.
bullshit. That's why they're just
Yeah.
like, you guys are idiots. Like, we ain't doing that. Look at, you're all crazy now.
100%. Yeah. And when you're
They
high
watched
ranking, you're
and
trying to get them to do
learned.
something that's a little bit harder. But yeah, you get it. But yeah, I do say that is probably the best quality I've noticed in them. Not saying they don't have other good qualities, but their best quality is if they need help, they will definitely ask. And it's, I think as long as you have something to offer them at that point, they'll keep coming back. And behavioral health is one of those big things a lot of them ask for, because this, their tolerance for stress is not, or I guess, bullshit, as you would say.
It
Their
is.
tolerance for that is not where ours was. they have to have those answers. So I think that they get stressed out a little bit easier. But yeah, I think asking them, or most of them you can tell, your soldiers, your people. So you
You,
can tell when somebody's off.
what's funny about that is like two things that came in my head.
Mm.
One, when you see those kids, because they're kids to us, right?
Yep.
And then the old timers, right? The old Sarge. What are they like? They're all soft. What
Awful.
kind of force do we have? They're all weak and crap and stuff. And I'm like, yeah, as you're, drinking your, whatever, NASCAR beer, you tell them, right? But in the same freaking sentence, and I've seen this numerous times where there's a concern, recruiting's down. And these same old farts are saying, well, I wouldn't have my kid go in the military. No, not now. It's different. It's crap. It's this, it's that. You can't have both. So it's interesting to see them like, I wouldn't send my kids. I wouldn't recommend this now. And then they're also like, oh, they're all soft. They're all, are they? Are
Now
they?
I
Are
know
they just
it takes a lot to ask
smarter?
for help. I'm telling you that. So it's
Takes a
called us
lot
soft if
more.
we want to.
Yes. Yes. You keep hiding in your little hole, drinking your NASCAR beer, being a keyboard warrior, and tell us about that. When they're out there like, hey, this is messed up. I need to process this. Okay, that's fair. Right. So, okay, I could keep going forever on this. Let me just wrap this up because we will be here forever. Dr. Porter, give me what do I want to ask you? Your warning signs for people to see, your top 5, maybe top 5 warning signs. And what are 3 things that person, that observer can do? One, to identify it's a warning sign, and how can they intervene? What are the steps that they can do when you're not mental health? Let me just add that.
So for the lay person, I think it's important for you to be able to, again, ask how they're doing, but also observe if people are doing things differently than they've normally been doing in terms of extremes, if they're giving away things, if they're really trying to finalize things when they've not been that person before you. So you're seeing a change in that behavior. That can oftentimes be a sign. If people are very angry and very short when they normally are not, that is oftentimes a sign of depression. So talking hopeless, a lot of dark doom and gloom types of comments, and not responding, isolating, those are all really good signs. If that's something that this person doesn't normally do, then that's the time to step in, have a conversation with them. That's what I'd say is in terms of the things you could do. But again, the warm handoff, walk them around and talk to them a little bit more. Take some time to find out what's going on with them, and then make that connection to EAP 2988, press 1. Talk to their family to find out if they have a support system that they haven't tapped into. And it's very telling when you try to reach out to other family members, you'll find out that somebody else has noticed something as well, or you'll find out that this person has burned all these bridges, so they really are hopeless because they're at the end of their rope. There's no way to turn. So make sure you follow through. Your instincts are probably very good if you take the time to trust those instincts.
Yeah, I agree with that. Go ahead, whoever wants to go.
Well, I was just going to say, don't always assume that someone else is going to address it. I think that oftentimes we see something and we think someone else will take care of it. Someone else will talk to them. Someone else will see if they're okay. If there's any question at all, I would rather have the uncomfortable conversation than to hear that someone committed suicide and I didn't do anything. So, again, if you see a sign, be willing to be uncomfortable.
There's the rule of 7 with that too, right? And the rule of 7 applies to many things. The rule of 7 is it takes 7 times for an action to happen in general. Right. So that could be products, right? You're going to put an advertisement in front of them 7 times before they'll consider buying it. But and I knew this as a nurse when you were dealing with domestic abuse, it was 7 interventions on average before that person would potentially leave that situation. And I'm sure that mental health probably falls under the rule of 7 somewhere. And maybe you're number 3,
Right.
you're number 5, maybe you're number 7. Go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, I would definitely say one of the big things, and I kind of see this a lot, and it's just on the day to day, working with veterans and their families, and just whether I'm a drill working with soldiers, whatever the case may be, don't be deterred by their silence. A lot of people, if you ask somebody how they're doing and they don't answer back, or like just finally give you the same answer and over again, people become deterred and they're just like, I'll leave it alone. Or
Yeah.
they're scared to keep pushing because they're scared they're going to push you away. The ones that I've seen that have always been successful or come out successful, or at least getting help for their family member, coworker, whatever the case may be, are usually the people who are persistent. There's a way of being persistent without, I guess, coming off in a nagging sense, and in a way to where you feel like you're annoying the person. But I think persistence will play a huge role in the success of whoever it is you're trying to help. So,
Do you agree with the statement that persistence is almost like a form of a litmus test for the person that is receiving the persistence? Meaning somebody asks once, and you're like, I'm fine. And they're like, out of here. Okay, we're good. I asked, see ya. And they're like, see, they don't really care. Again, this
yeah,
is the self-talk, right? This negative self-talk. They don't really care. I mean, they just walked off. Like, it's
yep.
almost like, let me see if you really care. I'm not saying everybody does that. I'm just saying that, like, you wonder if, like, well, if they come back and ask again, and you're like, damn, I can't shake them now. I just wonder if there may be some subconscious talk in there that's pushing them away to see if they'll come back, just to see if they think they're worthy to be valued, saved, talked to, whatever we want to call it.
Yeah, it's like being one of the people who's been on that end of having to share or get that question asked to you. When you are talking to that person, it's a two-way street. Everybody's sizing the other person up to see if they can get a read on what's happening. And if you're the person that's in need, you're definitely watching that person more than they're watching you, because you're looking for those signs that they are listening, that they are actually understanding what's coming out of your mouth. Because as soon as you see a deer in headlights and they don't come back with a question like, "Can you explain that?" Then in your
You shut
brain, you're
down.
like, you're just waiting for me to shut the hell up so you can go about your business. So I think definitely, I think we kind of said it earlier. If you're going to listen, like Dr. Porter said, listen to understand, but actually be there, be present. Just don't just be a husky body sitting there just waiting for this person to stop talking.
I tell my kids, I call it the Oreo cookie theory. This is my theory that I made up. And if somebody comes up to you and says, "Hey, would you like an Oreo cookie?" And they are smiling and they hand it to you, and you're like, "Yes, thank you." And you're like, "Okay, here, take it and enjoy." And then they go walking off. And then an hour later, somebody comes up to you, is like, "Do you want to order a cookie?" And you're like, "Well, yeah." And they whip it at you. And then a couple hours later, both those people come back. Well, we won't even say the first one. The second one comes back. Are you going to take that cookie when they offer it again? You're not. You're not going to take that cookie because that person just whipped a cookie at your head. You're like, yeah, no, thanks. I don't want that. So to say, how are you, has to be done with intention, and has to be done that you want to understand and want to listen to understand. So if I come up and be like, hey, how are you? And like you said, Dr. Porter, your feet are still moving forward, you're going to get, I'm fine. But if I stop and turn around and literally say, hey, and I'm in front of you going, how are you doing? And sincerely look at them and they're like, they really want to know, I'm going to get a different response most likely. So you can't just check the box. Go ahead, Andre.
Yeah, and just one more thing. I think in the sense of answering the question of what to do, because I think after you sit there, you listen, and they'll say the conversation does lead to, we got to make a decision on what we're going to do now. And just my experience, professional and personal, a lot of people tend to want to take the wheel on getting you help. Some people want to kind of get the help for you without you having any say so on what kind of help you're getting.
Yeah.
You see a more common practice, especially with parents, they tend to want to definitely take that control for their children, because no parent wants to bury their child, right? So they want to take that control, and they're like, you won't go out and get your self help. I'm going to get it for you. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. I mean, just from what I've seen, sometimes it just people, I think people do like the one lady you folks were talking about earlier, where they were just checking that box. They're like, whatever to get them off my back, I'll just go and I'll sit there and I'll talk for an hour. I'm not really going to engage, but I'm just going to play the game until they leave me alone about this. So I think as far as like what to do, yet again, personal and professional, I think definitely sitting down with that person and kind of coming up with a plan on what to do, get them involved on their own, getting themselves help. And then finally, I think, a lot of people are usually kind of, let's say if it's like an AA or NA meeting, like going to those things by yourself, the craps, it's kind of scary. Because you're walking into an unknown environment, you really have no clue what's getting ready to happen. So I think that obviously that escorting part, Army has the ACE program, right? Or what they used to practice as ACE, ask, care, escort. But actually, offering maybe to even go with them, or at least to drop them there, just to show that you are providing that support with them. And I don't know, stick it out until they tell you to leave the room, because maybe when they're ready to share with whatever group or person they're with, they may not want you there to hear what they have to share. So, I think definitely always tell people, once you kind of ask that question, the how are you, or are you thinking about killing yourself? Once you ask that question, you're involved. There's no
That's
backing
right.
up. You better be ready to engage 100%, because if they give you the answers that you're looking for, if you're looking for that yes or yeah, I need help, you have to be present. You have to be ready to play game with them, because if you just kind of half-ass the project, they're not going to go through it. And good luck with them telling somebody else this ever again, because it was embarrassing enough for them to say yes to you. So
agreed.
Yeah, I think one thing
that's
that's important to know is that it can happen to any of us.
Yep.
So when we put ourselves in that category of, oh, my kids know to come to me, or my relatives know what I do for a living, they're going to come to me. It can happen to any of us at any time.
Yes, it's all inclusive. That's right. What do you got, Leslie?
Now, I think that's great. There's plenty of programs out there. There's too many of us for anybody to ever feel alone. So again, have those uncomfortable conversations. I serve as a peer support on Serve and Protect. It's a nonprofit, and I'm that warm handoff. So when it's for first responders, healthcare workers, so they call in, and while they're getting them placed with a therapist that accepts their insurance, then I'm given their cell phone and their email, and then I communicate with them while they're being placed with a therapist that accepts their insurance. So I'm sure there's plenty of programs out there like that. So I'm just someone that they can talk to while they're being placed with a therapist. So I'm sure there's plenty of programs like that. But definitely, if you're having any thoughts of suicide or anything like that, definitely reach out and get a hold of someone. And anybody here on this podcast would be more than happy to talk to you for sure.
definitely.
Yep, I agree. I'll throw one out there. First Coast Heroes Outreach. They actually do for military people that are transitioning out of the military. They get up to, I think it's 11 or 15 mental health sessions. That's what they offer. And it's telehealth, so they can do it anywhere in the US. I know the founder, great people. And Prior Marine also, Andre, just FYI. So yeah, so there is a lot out there. So, all right, here's my final take on this. After listening to it, and we went a long time, but God, it was a really good discussion. I mean, like, I think I felt like I just had a therapy session, because we really talked about stuff that, like, it makes you think, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think my biggest takeaway of all this, if we ourselves do not start taking care of ourselves, we are not going to be good for anybody else. We are not going to be able to see the warning signs in anybody else. And we're going to miss that stuff. And like Leslie said, we're just messing up everybody when we don't take care of ourselves. And since we're like those go-to people and we want to be the it person, you ain't being it on anything if you're messed up. So,
No.
so don't take care of yourself, and then you'll be a better go-to person. And then, we all won't be picking up the pieces when you're in your 4th and 5th decade like we are. And then we're coming to realize, damn, Leslie and I are like, we got some work to do.
But I think it's also good to admit that it's
Yes.
okay to not be okay.
Yep.
It's okay.
Perfectionism is such a warning sign for me now. So when I see people that everything looks perfect, I'm like, oh, I've seen it too many times. And so I'm like, oh, I'll flaunt my hot messness. I definitely
That's
don't have
right.
it going
That's
on.
right. I will
Don't
ride
worry.
my hot mess express all the
It-
way out.
If I told you anything, I was sending the invite. It was Leslie's like, there's two Andres that I was dealing with, and one of them is a chef. And I sent him an invite to this podcast. And it wasn't until Leslie picked it up and I went, oh well, okay, let me try this again. Right. So yeah, we all have our thing. All right. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming here. We went way over our allotted time. I know I took up extra time of your day. I just think that this is a crazy important thing to talk about because we do not talk about it from our perspective. All we come up with is I'm fine. And then when we're not, and then somebody else is not fine and we don't know what to do, then what? Right. And it just turns into a really ugly circle. Right. So thank you, Dr. Porter, for being here. This was awesome. Andre, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your journey. Leslie, I am always thankful when you pop on with me. We will always have a laugh. I don't care what the topic is. We are going to laugh somewhere on this. It's just how we're built. And for the audience, I really hope if you got to listen to this more than once, listen to it because I want you to understand you are not alone. And we don't want you, talking to our young ones here, we don't want you finding out in your fourth and fifth decade when you can now process more of this stuff quicker that you're like, damn, I still got issues that I didn't process when I was in my 20s and 30s. And so for this young generation is not dealing with our bullshit, thank you.
Yeah.
Keep doing that. Keep demanding your self-care. Be willing to shut off the phone. I'm still working on that. And be willing to put yourself first because when you put yourself first, you're actually putting everybody first. And so I thank everybody that's listened. This podcast, share the hell out of it because I think it's probably one of the most important podcasts that we've done. And we want to hear from you. And if you have questions for any of us, any one of us will answer questions here. You can email cominghomewell@gmail.com and it will go to whoever you refer, whether it's Andre or Dr. Porter or Leslie or myself. We will get the question to who it needs to be and we'll answer it. We will not ignore it. I promise you that. So from all of us here in Bullets to Bedpans and our parent podcast, we should mention them a lot because they really do give us a great platform. We think you're all awesome and we hope you have a great week and peace out.